You would not believe the revelation that just emerged from Buckingham Palace as Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, has finally ended her silence with a disclosure that could rattle the monarchy to its foundation. In a shocking turn of events, Fergie alleges a clandestine pact exists between Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew, one that has been kept completely out of the public spotlight for several years. What was discussed in those private meetings? Why is it surfacing now? And, most critically, how might this rewrite everything we thought we understood about the royal family? Stay with us as we uncover the specifics of these volatile disclosures and this massive bombshell announcement. Following years of lingering on the periphery of royal scandals without ever fully diving in, the Duchess of York has dropped a truth bomb that shakes the institution's very core. According to Sarah, a covert deal once linked Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew in an alliance forged not through genuine friendship, but through pure strategic convenience. The specifics are certainly not the kind of developments that anyone could have possibly seen coming. November 2025 might be remembered as the exact moment Sarah Ferguson quit shielding the establishment that had never truly looked out for her. For several decades, she remained the royal wildcard who was far too connected to dismiss yet far too erratic to fully trust. She observed various scandals playing out from a safe distance while holding on to intelligence that rarely saw the light of day until right now. She is finally exhausted from harboring secrets that are simply not hers to protect anymore. Her recent appearance was entirely unannounced and clearly calculated to make a major statement. Unlike typical royal appearances, there was no official setting or traditional backdrop involved. Instead, Sarah delivered her message from a modest Mayfair townhouse, a setting that felt intentionally pointed. This was not a pre-approved script vetted by assistants or legal teams, as it was far more personal and defiant, signaling she was finished playing the game. What Sarah detailed left even the most experienced royal experts completely stunned. She alleged that during the fallout of Prince Andrew's catastrophic 2019 BBC Newsnight interview, Meghan Markle reached out to him in total secrecy. That specific interview, which was intended to soothe public anger regarding Andrew's ties to Jeffrey Epstein, achieved the exact opposite result. It effectively terminated his public duties and left him completely isolated from his own relatives. According to Sarah, Meghan recognized a unique opportunity immediately within the chaos. In Andrew, she allegedly identified more than just a disgraced member of the royalty, as she saw a source of leverage. He was vulnerable, pushed to the side, and harbored deep resentment toward the institution that had essentially discarded him. More crucially, he still possessed intimate knowledge of how the palace functioned behind the scenes. He understood who wielded actual power, where the vulnerabilities were located, and how high-level decisions were truly reached in private. The purported deal was quite simple in its design, but incredibly dangerous in its potential impact. Meghan reportedly moved forward to offer Andrew something he was desperately lacking, which was public empathy, curated media backing, and a connection to her growing circle of powerful associates. In exchange, Andrew offered vital intelligence, providing deep dives into palace mechanics, internal family friction, and the kind of background that could be utilized as a weapon if the need arose. Sarah notes she did not stumble upon this information instantly, as she initially dismissed the subtle warning signs. However, over time, specific patterns started to manifest that she could no longer ignore. Some of these patterns included conversations that abruptly died the moment she walked into a room, alongside a very clear shift in Andrew's behavior whenever Meghan's name was mentioned. Eventually, pretending nothing was wrong stopped being an option. The moment everything finally clicked, Sarah claims, occurred in early 2020, just a few weeks before Meghan and Prince Harry went public with their exit plan. Andrew traveled to Canada at the time, and the official story was a vague need for privacy and a break from the media. Sarah adamantly maintains that this was merely a smokescreen. The real objective, she asserts, was a confidential sit-down with Meghan at a highly private estate on Vancouver Island. Exactly what was discussed during that specific meeting remains somewhat murky. Sarah confesses she does not possess every single detail, but the events that followed convinced her of its massive importance. Andrew came back appearing much more guarded and deliberate in his actions. Strategies were being formulated, and battle lines were clearly being established. What had started as a simple exchange of information was rapidly evolving into a coordinated effort. The timing of Sarah's choice to speak out right now is far from a coincidence. Prince Andrew's various attempts to fix his public image have consistently crashed and burned, hitting a wall of public hatred at every turn. Meghan's connection with the royal family remains fractured beyond repair, regardless of the occasional gossip about a potential reconciliation. According to Sarah, the internal pressure reached a peak where staying silent felt like a total betrayal of responsibility. There is also a very personal motivation behind her decision to go public. Sarah expressed that she genuinely feared her daughters, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, were at risk of being dragged into a situation that was spinning out of control. She hinted at certain threats and rising tensions, but chose not to provide specific evidence at this stage. What she made crystal clear was that keeping quiet was no longer a viable path forward. The response from the palace was both instantaneous and entirely expected. Within minutes, various sources tossed Sarah's claims aside, calling them fabricated, dramatic, and fueled by psychological instability. It was the classic strategy used to discredit the messenger, control the story, and move on as quickly as possible. However, Sarah Ferguson is not some random outsider guessing from the sidelines. She has spent nearly 40 years living inside the engine room of royal life. She has been publicly shamed, privately sidelined, and consistently underestimated by those in power. People who know her intimately say she has many flaws, but lying about something this serious is not one of them. What makes this disclosure so disturbing is not just the secret alliance itself, but what it implies about the modern state of the monarchy. If disgraced and separated royals can secretly team up against the establishment, then the old rules of loyalty and silence are dead. Power has shifted, intelligence leaks through different channels now, and social influence no longer depends on a palace title. Whether Sarah's assertions can be proven beyond a doubt remains an open question. What is undeniable is that the damage to the reputation of the house has already been inflicted. The concept that such a deal could exist sounds just believable enough to worsen the public's lack of trust. Once that seed of doubt is planted, it becomes incredibly difficult to pull out. Sarah Ferguson did not just end her silence. She shattered the myth that the royal family still operates as a single unit. But with this fracture comes several haunting questions. What was the ultimate goal of this alleged partnership if Meghan truly wanted to distance herself from the royal world? Why did she require high-level intel from Andrew? And was her curiosity really worth the risk of associating with such a radioactive figure? To comprehend how this alleged pact formed and the shadow it casts, we have to look back to November 2019. That was the month Prince Andrew sat across from Emily Maitlis for a BBC interview that was supposed to be his big comeback. Instead, it turned into a textbook example of how to destroy a reputation in real time. He displayed no obvious regret and offered a bizarre alibi involving a pizza express in a small town. He even claimed he was physically unable to sweat due to a medical issue from his time in the Falklands War. Every single response he gave only made the situation significantly worse for him. The public reaction was fast and incredibly harsh. Within a matter of days, Andrew was forced to step away from his official duties. Even though he stepped down, corporate sponsors vanished and charitable organizations cut all ties immediately. Even within the palace walls, doors were being quietly but firmly locked against him. He was a prince by title, but in reality, he had become a massive liability to the crown. The queen stood by him with a mother's devotion, but even her shield had its limitations. Public mocking followed him everywhere he went, and the silence from his relatives was deafening. Now, consider Meghan Markle's position during that exact same period of time. She was fighting her own high-stakes battles under a non-stop media assault and feeling more isolated by the day. She and Harry were already talking about leaving, even though the specifics hadn't been nailed down yet. But Meghan, as Sarah tells it, was never someone to just let things happen to her. She deeply understood how institutions worked and the power of perfect timing. Andrew's total downfall offered her something that she could actually use. As Sarah stated quite bluntly, a man with nothing left to lose is often the most useful ally. The first move toward him didn't happen directly, but through several middlemen. People in Andrew's inner circle started getting messages from individuals close to Meghan's camp. These messages were carefully worded and full of sympathy for his situation. They made comments about unfair media treatment and how the palace uses double standards for different family members. They acknowledged that both individuals understood exactly what it felt like to be tossed aside for the sake of the institution's public image. Andrew reacted positively because why wouldn't he when someone was finally not judging him? She listened to him and validated the anger he felt toward the system. The fact that she was married to his nephew and was also being pushed out only made the bond feel more authentic. It felt, at least to Andrew, like a rare lifeline in a very hostile environment. By the start of 2020, the entire vibe of their communication had shifted significantly. What started as friendly support had transformed into something much more calculated and deliberate. Sarah claims she eventually found proof of frequent contact between Andrew's phone and various unknown numbers. These were eventually traced back to members of Meghan's personal team. These calls were not just emotional support sessions, as they were tactical in nature. They discussed the specific vulnerabilities of the palace and internal disagreements among the staff. They even compared notes on how official statements were being received and how media narratives could be steered without leaving a trace. According to Sarah, the goal was no longer just about venting frustrations, but about strategic positioning. That secret meeting in Canada served as the ultimate turning point for the alliance. Andrew's travel was handled with extreme care to avoid the usual patterns or public schedules. He stayed at private residences that were connected to people they both knew and trusted. The sit-down with Meghan happened in a remote spot chosen specifically to ensure total privacy. Whatever was said during those hours moved their relationship into a brand-new phase. Sarah's sources identified 3 primary pillars of the secret agreement they reached. The first was a commitment to mutual protection against their common critics. Both Andrew and Meghan were under intense pressure and felt the palace had left them to fend for themselves. They agreed to have each other's backs whenever a good opportunity presented itself. This included passing along selective leaks and using friendly reporters to push specific angles. They also coordinated their messaging to put subtle pressure on news outlets to go easier on them. The second pillar was the systematic sharing of high-level information. Andrew had decades of knowledge about how the royal machine actually operates. He knew who made the real calls, where the drama was hidden, and which rules could be bent. Despite the public perception, Meghan brought a different kind of power to the table. She understood the modern digital media world and had global reach that Andrew could never dream of. The exchange was beneficial for both, but it also made the situation much more volatile. What made the deal truly dangerous was not just the intel, but the leverage it provided each of them. Each person now held sensitive parts of the other's story in their hands. Trust became a business transaction, and once that happens, the bond is purely about survival. According to Sarah, nothing was ever put into a formal written contract. It didn't need to be, because it was an understanding reinforced by their actions. For a while, both sides truly believed they could keep the whole thing under wraps. They were wrong, because once that unwritten deal started moving, it turned into something much more explosive. It became a high-stakes exchange built on intelligence, social influence, and coordinated moves. What started as a way to help each other quickly turned into a dangerous game of chicken. Each side held enough dirt on the other to cause total destruction if the trust ever broke. That reality alone made the whole setup incredibly risky for everyone involved. But Sarah notes that the two of them did not just stop at sharing secrets. The most alarming part was not what they shared, but what they were planning for the future. When cooperation turns into a long-term strategy, the clock starts ticking before the whole thing blows up. Information and influence were the currency of their new world. The sharing of intelligence helped them both, but it created a very shaky balance of power. Each one now had the ability to ruin the other if the partnership failed. That risk factor made the whole arrangement a ticking time bomb from the start. But Sarah insists that the planning went even deeper than anyone realized. The third and most disturbing part was their focus on forward-thinking strategy. According to her story, Andrew and Meghan didn't just talk about the past. They discussed future scenarios and potential crises that could hit the palace. They identified moments when the institution would be vulnerable or under heavy public fire. They brainstormed ways that coordinated action could flip the script or apply heavy pressure on the leadership. These were not casual chats, as they were cold and calculated business meetings. They were building a safety net for themselves because they felt the family had already turned its back. Nothing was ever signed or documented in an obvious way. Sarah explains that both were far too smart to leave a paper trail. But the agreement was there, a shared reality reinforced by timing and specific behaviors. What neither of them saw coming was that someone on the inside was actually paying attention. Someone saw the dots connecting and realized exactly where this path was leading. Sarah Ferguson claims that her long silence was not about being a coward, but about staying alive. At that time, she was in a very shaky spot within the royal circle. Her money, her access, and her daughter's futures were all tied to the family's good graces. Speaking out would have resulted in her being totally cut off. Remaining silent meant watching Andrew fall deeper into a hole that could only end in tragedy. It also meant watching an institution she once loved slowly fall apart from the inside. It was being eaten alive by its own obsession with secrets and saving face. The final straw for Sarah came quite recently. She wouldn't give the exact details, but the message she sent was very clear. The deal had moved into a much more active and dangerous phase. Real plans were being made and serious lines were being crossed by both parties. For the first time, Sarah felt the blowback would land directly on her own children. That was the moment when keeping the secret was no longer an option she could live with. To understand Meghan's part in this, Sarah says you have to look at her 2019 reality. This was not a woman who was just making things up as she went along. She had entered the family with a lot of hope, only to find herself a target for the media. She felt increasingly alone and unsupported within the palace infrastructure. Her ties with the top royals were dying, and her husband couldn't fully protect her from the system. The message she kept getting was that she needed to shut up and fit in. Meghan has always been a strategist because her entire life and career required that skill. Her rise into the world's most elite circles showed she knew exactly how to play the power game. According to Sarah, her reaching out to Andrew was a tactical move, not a sentimental one. What Meghan needed more than anything at that specific moment was leverage. She and Harry were planning to leave, but just leaving wasn't going to be enough. They needed a way to make sure the palace wouldn't destroy them once they were gone. Andrew was the perfect person to help because he was angry and knew where the bodies were buried. He knew how the internal politics worked and who really pulled the strings in the office. He knew where to push buttons and which threats would actually be taken seriously. The genius of her move, Sarah says, was how quiet and gentle it appeared. She didn't make demands or act like she was trying to control him. She offered a listening ear when Andrew had absolutely nobody else to talk to. She made herself out to be another victim of the same cold and unfeeling royal machine. But behind that kind face was a very specific and focused intent. Every talk had a goal, and every shared complaint led to more secrets being revealed. Meghan understood a basic rule of psychology. Betrayed people love to talk to those who agree with them. Sarah says the way she gathered information was very professional and organized. Meghan asked about how things were done and who actually made the final decisions. She wanted to know who had the real power and who was just there for the cameras. She studied the entire system like an expert, looking for the weak spot in a safe. Andrew was so lonely and bitter that he talked far more than he ever should have. The intelligence she gathered served a lot of different purposes for her. Some of it was for defense to stop the palace from attacking her and Harry. Some was for offense to help her control what the media said about them. And some of it, Sarah thinks, was just saved for a rainy day when they might really need it. The Vancouver sit-down changed the relationship from talking to acting. By the start of 2020, the couple was finishing up their big exit strategy. The news was going to blow the world's mind and make the palace furious. But Meghan knew the real war would happen after the announcement was made. Handling the fallout would take a lot of skill, timing, and internal help. According to Sarah, that is exactly where Andrew played his part in the next chapter. While the public was focused on the headlines, a quiet plan was working behind the scenes. It was a plan that didn't rely on fighting, but on having the right access. This was where having a man on the inside really started to pay off for them. It wasn't about big statements, but about who heard what first and how they could twist it. That way of operating would soon turn into what Sarah calls Meghan's ultimate power play. But the question remains whether Andrew was just watching or if he was helping on purpose. Meghan's strategy was all about keeping the palace off balance. According to Sarah, Andrew agreed to be a secret source of information for her team. He would stay quiet, but keep his ears open for any gossip or family reactions. Then he would pass the important stuff back to Meghan's people so they could prepare. It wasn't every little thing, just the stuff that gave them a real advantage. In return, Meghan used her massive media influence to help Andrew out. She could get a story changed or a headline softened if things were getting too rough for him. It was a very delicate game that relied on nobody ever finding out. If it ever came to light, it would prove everything their haters had been saying all along. It would make them both look like they were trying to take down the monarchy for personal gain. It would give the king a perfect reason to cut them off forever. Yet, both of them thought they were smart enough to get away with it. They both believed they could outplay a system that had been around for centuries. What they didn't count on was Sarah Ferguson deciding to tell the truth. Sarah wasn't trying to get revenge or get back into the spotlight for herself. She was acting like a mother who felt her children were in real danger. She thought her daughters were getting way too close to a disaster that was about to explode. The longer Andrew stayed in this secret deal, the higher the chance it would ruin his kids, too. And when Sarah feels her family is being threatened, she stops playing nice. What makes Meghan's alleged part in this so huge is how much it goes against her public image. She has always said she just wanted to help and was bullied out of the family. She said she only wanted to live a quiet life away from the drama. A secret deal with Andrew suggests she was actually being very aggressive and strategic. That doesn't mean she didn't have a hard time, but it changes the context of her actions. She could have been a victim and a player at the exact same time. She could have been hurt and still been planning her next 10 moves in the game. But this arrangement makes her story a lot more complicated than she lets on. It makes her leaving look less like an escape and more like a tactical retreat. From the palace's view, this is the worst-case scenario they could imagine. This isn't just about two people they don't like hanging out together. It's about a massive breach of trust and security within the family. If Andrew was leaking stuff while he was still at family events, nothing is safe. Palace rules are there for a reason, to keep the secrets inside the walls. They are the only thing keeping the whole idea of the monarchy together. Even after he was fired, Andrew was still allowed to be around the family. He went to the parties, talked to the staff, and heard things without even trying. He knew about the money, the health issues, and the plans for the next king. None of it was top secret, but it was all very private and sensitive stuff. If you have that kind of info, you can use it to do a lot of damage. What scares the palace the most is how good Meghan is at using the media. She knows how to make a story go viral and how to make it stick to someone. If she had inside info, she could have her response ready before the palace even finished theirs. She could attack or defend without ever making it look like she was the one doing it. Then there is the problem of the example this sets for the future. If this deal is real, it shows that you don't lose your power just because you're kicked out. It shows that the old ways of controlling people with silence don't work anymore. In a world where everyone has a phone, you don't need a title to have influence. Other family members who get into trouble will see this as a way out. They won't just sit there and be quiet. They will start making their own deals. They will gather their own dirt and make sure they are protected from being fired. That idea is what truly keeps the traditionalists up at night. As the news started to break, Andrew's behavior began to change once again. According to Sarah, he became a lot more careful and focused in his actions. He was watching the news like a hawk and changing how he acted based on the stories. He seemed to know things that a man in his position shouldn't really know. To Sarah, the whole thing was as clear as day. This was not a bunch of accidents. It was a carefully managed plan. The palace can say it's not true and try to make Sarah look crazy. That's their go-to move, and it has worked for them many times in the past. But this time, the claims are hitting all the spots that make people nervous. It's about being loyal, being safe, and keeping the family together. Whether the whole truth ever comes out is something we might never know. Places like the monarchy are built to take hits and keep moving forward. But Sarah Ferguson has dropped a bomb that they are really struggling to deal with. She has created a sense of doubt that feels very real to the public. And once people start doubting you, being quiet just makes you look even guiltier. In the world of royal politics, what you don't say is often more important than what you do. But if you're being too quiet, people start wondering what you're trying to hide. The people who know how Meghan talks say her silence right now is very interesting. She doesn't usually just react. She waits and plans her words very carefully. That suggests that her people are taking Sarah very seriously right now. In the palace, a quiet and smart response usually means they are in big trouble. Meanwhile, the internet has turned into a total war zone over this story. Everyone is talking about secret meetings and coded messages and what it means for the king. The palace can tell the newspapers what to write, but they can't stop the internet. Once a story like this gets going, it's like a train that nobody can stop. Behind the scenes, the staff is working 24/7 to try and fix the mess. They are looking at the news, the legal stuff, and how to talk to the family. Every choice they make is a big risk that could make things even worse. The old way of just ignoring the problem isn't working in the year 2025. Information moves too fast and people are way too suspicious these days. King Charles is facing the biggest test of his time as the boss. He has to be a good brother and a good father at the same time. He has to save the monarchy while his family is basically at war with itself. One wrong move, and everyone will start questioning if he can even lead. His team is telling him he needs to look strong, but also be honest with people. That is a very hard balance to hit when everything is exploding around you. The legal side of this is also a total nightmare for the palace lawyers. If Andrew broke his contracts, they have to decide if they want to sue him. But suing him would just bring more attention to the secrets he was sharing. It's a situation where no matter what they do, they are going to lose something. They are stuck in a high-stakes game where every move is under a giant microscope. Sarah's news came out of nowhere and hit them like a ton of bricks. Andrew is staying quiet, and Meghan is giving her usual careful denials. Everyone is waiting to see who is going to make the next big move in the game. If even a small part of this is proven true, it's going to be a massive disaster. Just the idea that a secret deal could exist has already ruined the trust. The staff and the partners are all looking at each other, wondering who is actually loyal. Once you think people are lying to you, it's hard to ever trust them again. And then you have the Harry factor, which makes it even more messy. Did he know about the deal, or was he kept in the dark by his own wife? Both answers are really bad for his reputation and his relationship with his family. People who hate him and people who love him will both use this to prove their point. As this keeps going, the palace is dealing with like 5 different crises at once. They are worried about security, their image, and the family staying together. Sarah might have just wanted to help her kids, but she started a global fire. Her actions are being felt in every corner of the royal world right now. So when nobody trusts anyone, how does a big institution like this keep going? The fallout is now pushing the whole system into a place it has never been before. The old ways of fixing things just aren't working like they used to. This is the part where everyone starts panicking and making new plans. The palace is in full-on panic mode, but they have no power. A simple press release isn't going to fix a problem this big and deep. Every word they say is being torn apart by millions of people online. They know that if they mess up the timing, the story will just keep living. Sarah is staying in the public eye and making sure the pressure stays high. By not telling everything at once, she keeps Andrew and Meghan on their toes. Every new hint she gives is a reminder that she has more dirt. This is making the family fights even worse than they were before. King Charles is stuck in the middle of a very personal and very public mess. He has to protect the crown while his brother and son are the ones attacking it. Every choice he makes could be the one that ruins his reputation forever. If he fails, the people who want to end the monarchy will have more power. He is trying to stay calm, but everyone can see how stressed the system is. Harry is also in a very bad spot, with no clear way out. If Meghan was working with Andrew, it makes Harry look like a fool or a liar. Both of those things ruin the story they have been telling the world for years. It puts him under a spotlight that he really doesn't want right now. Andrew's daughters are also being ruined by their parents' bad choices. They have worked so hard to have their own lives and be respected. Now they are being pulled back into the drama that they had nothing to do with. Sources say they are really mad at their mom for not telling them first. Private family fights are getting very heated and very ugly behind the scenes. Some people think Sarah is a hero for telling the truth about the lies. Others think she is just trying to get attention and rewrite her own history. A lot of people are just tired of hearing about royal drama every single day. But the fact that everyone is fighting shows that the palace has lost control. They can't just hide behind their walls and expect people to listen to them. The whole thing shows that nobody on the inside actually trusts each other. If your own family is making secret deals, then the whole system is broken. The staff is now looking at every message and every call with total suspicion. The rules that kept the family together for years are basically gone now. It's a very scary time for people who want the monarchy to survive. The next few weeks are going to be full of more secrets and more moves. Andrew might try to tell his side of the story before things get worse. Meghan might try to change her story to make it look like it wasn't a big deal. Sarah is probably going to keep dropping hints to keep herself in control. No matter what happens, the damage to the family's image is already done. The House of Windsor is now living in a world where they can't trust anyone. Loyalty isn't a given anymore, and even the ones who left can still cause pain. Sarah Ferguson didn't just tell a secret, she changed the whole game forever. The monarchy might still be around, but it's going to be a lot weaker now. The world's view of them has changed, and it's never going back to normal.